Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, championing the unsung heroes of business, accountants. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and I am live at Scaling New Heights 2023 on the exhibit show floor. And with me today is Liz Farr, founder of Farr Communications. Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Ed. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, first off, Liz, why do you do what you do?
Well, I am a ghostwriter for thought leaders in accounting. And what I am trying to do is take the ideas that are stuck inside the heads of many great leaders in this profession and get them out so that the people who need them can have access to them.
And you were talking about, before we started recording, that you have some tales of good leadership and bad leadership.
Yes, good leadership. The best leader I had was actually my boss when I worked at an H&amp block in rural New Mexico. And I had a habit for a couple of days of getting late to work. So one day he took me aside and said, "Hey, Liz, can you do me a favor? Can you leave your house 10 minutes earlier in the morning?" And I really liked that. It wasn't, "You did bad, you're late, you're a bad person." It was, "Can you do me a favor?" And that actually got me to change. Yeah.
And it worked.
It worked. It was successful. And the bad leadership was a former supervisor who would do what I called walk-by management. He would walk by the door of my office, stop, take 2 steps backwards, poke his head in my office, interrupt me from what I was doing, and say, "So, how you doing on that project you're working on?" And it was really irritating. It didn't help me get what I was doing done. It actually detracted me from doing it because it was pointless. Now, what was I supposed to say? "Oh, great," or "Oh, no, I have a problem." What did it do? And the end effect of that kind of management was getting me to leave that firm.
Do you think that his walk-by was genuine? Was he genuinely curious, or was it just practice and habit, and he really didn't care?
It was just a checking the box activity for him.
Unlike the first boss, who, that was more of his style to
Yes.
confront in such a way. Well, tell me about what you've taken from that, both of those stories in your career. Have you put any of those into practice for what you do?
That it's a whole lot easier to get somebody to do something if you pose it as something that you can do for me. And you make it more human instead of, "I'm the leader of you and I have this big stick I'm going to beat you with, or you will be out of your job." It was more like, "Hey, can you help us get everything done here?"
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious now about your ghostwriting. Talk to me about your production function. Like, how do you go about doing that in many cases? Do you have people just record stuff and you write it, or do you interview them? Talk about your production function.
It's mostly a combination of recording and interviewing. I work from transcripts of interviews. I ask questions. Sometimes I will weave in a little bit of research to back up what they're saying. And it's a lot of piecing together. It's like taking a thread of something that they said 2 weeks ago and then combining it with something they said today and then something they said a few days earlier and making a beautiful, coherent paragraph out of that.
And do you try to write in the style of the person that you're?
Yes.
So talk to me about how you get your in your mindset to do that.
I listen to the person as much as I can, and when I'm setting the transcripts, I pay attention to the words that they use. One millennial person I work with a lot uses a whole lot of adverbs. Actually, finally, really, truly, everywhere. And so if I have an outside proofreader looking at it, then I would say, please, don't touch the adverbs.
Because that's part of the voice.
Yeah. And another person I work with has a really different way of putting words together in a sentence. It's a really different ordering. I can't really explain it.
Like Yoda?
It's kind of like that. And it's just something that I kind of, sometimes I'll pull a direct quote from a transcript and I'll want to rearrange the words and then I'll say, no, stop. That's how he speaks. And the result of that is that once when I wrote a piece and his son read it, he said, that sounds just like my dad.
And Liz, we have an exit question we ask all of our guests. That is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero?
My hero, I would say, is my late mom. And I've come to realize recently how much of a disruptor she was in her own time. In the 1940s, she studied chemistry. This was at a time when she was told she could only be a nurse or a teacher. But she studied chemistry, and she was recruited to work for the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Wow.
Which is where she met my dad, and they got married.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Very neat.
Yes.
So, lastly, Liz, how can somebody contact you?
You can find me at farrcommunications.com. I'm also on Twitter, Liz_Farr, Farr, and look forward to connecting with listeners of this podcast.
All right. Liz Farr, founder of Farr Communications, thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.
Thank you.
Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.